When the first AirPods come out, I was really excited. I bought them alongside my iPhone 7 Plus in jet black, and it was really exciting to have truly wireless earphones. Since then, Apple has updated these. They now support and they also support wireless charging. But the big news that came out recently was the introduction of AirPods Pro. And even though in many ways these are a major step forward, there are a few ways they are not. In this video, I would like to talk about them. So in this video, there would be no unboxing, there would be no technical specifications. I am not qualified to give you any advice about sound quality, and the value is a really personal thing, so I'm gonna leave that up to you. However, what I am going to talk about is design, ergonomics, and a few things that Apple maybe could improve in future versions of AirPods. The first thing that I want to talk about is actually on the back of the case. We're going to start with the case. And if you look closely at the first AirPods, they have this rather shiny metal piece, hinge here. And the new AirPods are using, looks like a different material. It's very similar to the aluminum they're using in their laptops and the iPads. But if you look at them side by side, the size got awfully bigger on the new one. And I'm going to talk about a few reasons why I think that happened. If you look at the old ones, if you look at the hinge on the first generation of AirPods, you can see that it's really small. And the reason that this piece exists at all is actually quite simple. When you open the AirPods, so if you look at it from the side, what many of us think happens when you open a case or a lid or anything that hinges around and revolves around the hinge is that you have the case, and if this is the lid, many of us think that the hinge happens right at this point. But that actually is not physically possible because the hinge needs to have something that revolves, and if it were to rotate exactly at that point, we would have a half circle protruding out of it, but we don't. This is a flush surface, which means it is not possible for it to rotate around this point. So if you look at the middle piece, at this piece, and as I open it, you can see that it is opening with the lid. That means that this piece is attached to the top. So these are the same piece, and these pieces are the same. So if you were to separate the lid from the case, it would be a line like this. But when you look at the design, Apple did a really great job of integrating the hinge into the lid so that you have one continuous line that goes all around the AirPod, and it is uninterrupted, and it looks like one solid piece down here. And because the hinge, this piece of the hinge is below the lid, means that the hinge the lid actually has a shape like this, and it rotates around here, which means when you open it, it actually goes slightly below and behind the case. So when you open the first generation of AirPods, this is where the lid goes. It doesn't start here. It actually starts from here, and once it rotates, you end up with a shape like this. And this is really nice and simple. But when you come to the second AirPods, it's quite different. So when I open this right now, you can see that the middle piece is no longer rotating. So if I draw this one out, you can see that when I open the lid, the only pieces that are moving are these two pieces on the side. The rest of this T shape in the middle is actually the same as the bottom of the case. So these two are the same, and then these two are actually part of the lid. And one downside with this new design is that the line that goes around the case is now interrupted. It does not go all the way. And if I'm honest, when I'm looking at them side by side, I much prefer the older, simpler design. Now, there are a few reasons that I think they went with this design. And I think it starts with the size of the new AirPods that are much bigger. Now, I'm going to walk you through what I think was the decision-making process that Apple went through to get to the new hinges. If you look at the old AirPods, as I open them, if you look right here, as I close them, if you look right here, you can see how close the lid is getting to the AirPods. Like, we're talking maybe 0.8, 0.6 of a millimeter. This is really tight margins. And remember we talked about how the hinge of the first AirPods moves back? That means when it rotates back, it is actually carving into the area that is inside the lid a bit. But with the new AirPods, if you look at the same gap as I open and close them, if you look here, the margins are even smaller. The gap is so small. Like, if I were to guess, it would be like 0.3 millimeters. Like, I am amazed that an object like this with such precision could be manufactured in the millions. Like, this on its own is amazing. But you can see, because the hinge is higher, now when you open it if you look at it from the side, it does not go behind the case. It's actually above. So if we were to look at the same hinge and compare it to the first generation of AirPods, it would actually end up being here. And this is quite a difference. So when it's here, this allows for the two larger AirPods to fit there and not get hit by the lids every time you open and close them. That's one reason. But because the hinges have to move up, that meant that this design had to be reversed. So I think the iteration that got from this to this went something like this. So they started with simply reversing the hinge. And I think it would have been great if they stayed there. But they couldn't have stayed there because they wouldn't have been able to clear the same amount of space. So they had to make this a bit taller. And so if this was 1, this was 2, 3, I guess would have been slightly closer to what we see now, which is the same design, but a bit taller. And I think the height was purely the result of the larger AirPods that need to fit in the case. So they had to make the top part taller. So if you imagine it without the bottom piece, like if you cut this part out, this is what we end up with. And because it came a bit larger, now this, I'm guessing is stainless steel, is now highly reflective. It captures fingerprints and it's not as pleasing perhaps at this size. And maybe they thought, hey, at this size, we can get away with using aluminum. Because we have a larger area to work with, it doesn't need to be as strong. Maybe aluminum would be okay. But when you make a larger piece like this, not as small and I want to say delicate as this one, when you make an aluminum piece like this, it is no longer as polished as you would expect from Apple. So someone thought, hey, why don't we make this a full circle and we make it symmetrical? This is what they came up with. But because this piece had to be connected with this one, they removed this line and they ended up with this. So this is what the design progress was, if you were to ask me. And I don't like it. This piece is a lot bigger compared to the first one, and it's just not an elegant solution. I wish they could maybe find a way to fit these better in the case. Maybe they could carve a larger piece of the lid so that it would be able to close. And yeah, so that is my first gripe with the new AirPods compared to the original ones. So the next thing that actually kind of bugs me a lot is the inconsistent gaps on the back of the hinges. As you can see, these two lines have a much tighter margin compared to these two and this large gap on top. Like, these two are the smallest. The lines that goes around in these three sides is a medium gap, and the line on top and these two lines here are the large gaps. And I know why there are different size gaps, because when this thing rotates, it needs to have a room to rotate around. You can't have like infinitely sharp edges that don't scrub against each other. So you need to have this extra gap, because when it rotates, otherwise it would scrub on the bottom piece. But I just can't help it. I don't I don't like the gaps. I don't like the inconsistent gaps back here. The second thing I want to talk about is in two parts actually. One is an improvement and one is, I think, a slight drawback. So if you look at the edges here, you can see that there's a lip that goes around here. Like I can run the tip of the Apple Pencil around it. And the reason for that is that this middle piece, when they are creating AirPods, the middle piece is actually put inside the outer casing. So these are two separate pieces. And there is a little piece of it sticking out. And the reason is that if you look at the lid, the opposite of it is on the lid, so that when you close it, it forms a perfect fit and it doesn't wobble around. I mean, if you really push it, you can move it a little bit, but there's no squeaking, there's no sound, and it's really solid. I love it. But in the new one, this is the improvement. They managed to fit the inside piece almost perfectly with the outer piece. So if you run your finger, like you might not even feel that this is two pieces. But the downside is that when you close it, I'm gonna put it next to the microphone. Can you hear that? This is not good. And sometimes when I even open it, yeah, this is not a pleasant sound. This doesn't scream quality to me. Like, I like the opening, but even at the end, there's a bit of flimsiness going on here, but compared to this one, the hinge is the downfall. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Now, the third point, the light, the charging light. I really like that they moved the charging light to the front. I have the first generation AirPods here, which has the light in the middle here. And the reason that it's in the middle is that the first generation AirPods didn't have wireless charging. So you only really needed to know the charge level when you opened it. But when they introduced the wireless charging case for it, they added a light in front so that when you put it on a wireless charging pad, you can see if it's green or red or orange, and you know your charge levels. In these ones, the light stayed in the front, which is great. There is a bit of a difference in the way that the light shines through these. So when these are off, if you look at them, you can see that these have a bit of a grayish color to them. Whereas the old one, if I wait for them to turn off, you can see that they are black. Yeah, you can see it's much darker when it's turned off. And I think I know why that is. So the inner casing for the original AirPods was not using a translucent material, whereas the new one is using a slightly translucent material. So when the light turns on, you see a sharp light that is only the shape of the light that is turning on. But when you look at the new ones, there is come closer. There's almost a bit of a glow that goes around this light. And it's as if the light is shining through the material of the case around it. And I'm not against it. Personally, I think like a glow effect might add some nice feeling to it. Usually it means lower quality plastics, but I'm okay with it in this case. What I really don't like about it is that I can see it when it is turned off. I got an engraving here, and this dot looks like it's a dot to an invisible eye that is here, and I don't like it. Why can I see it? Remember the unibody MacBooks when they came out? They had the breathing light that would slowly turn on and slowly dim away, and it looked like it's breathing to highlight that your laptop is asleep. It's okay. But then this thing has this dot in front that is always there. I mean, it lights up. You know it's a light, but when it's an indicator shouldn't be there when it's not indicating something. That was the concept with the first MacBook and the breathing light. And I really like that the light in the original AirPods was inside the case, because when I open it, I am showing intent that I'm about to use this. Let me know what the state of charge is. And when I'm not using them, there is no light. The next thing I want to talk about is the button in the back. This is basically a shortcoming, I would say, of the Bluetooth technology. I don't think there's much Apple can do to not have a pairing mode button. And Apple tried their best to hide this button as much as possible. I mean, when you look in the back of both of them, you know there is a button there, but if you ignore it enough, it kind of just blends in with the rest of the case. And the next thing I want to talk about is at the bottom of the case, the charging port. Hopefully this year they're going to introduce the AirPower that we're waiting for 3 years now. And if they do, and if they remove this one, hopefully they can put a bigger battery inside here. I wouldn't miss it one bit. Wireless charging is the future, so I don't mind it. And the last thing that I want to talk about, the design, well, it actually falls under ergonomics, is how you open the two cases. Yeah, so these are rectangular shapes, and the way we are comfortable holding rectangular shapes is along the longer side, because that gives us a better grip. If you ever held a Zippo lighter, like the reason it opens from the top is that this is how you naturally hold a rectangular object in your hand. And they have this lip here that helps you get a grip when you're opening it, which is great. And this is just so natural. Like just doing it, I can do it 100 times and it would be great. But this thing, the natural way of holding it is this. So how do I go from this to this? And it's flimsy. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about the hinge anymore. How do you go from this to is this how you're supposed to open it? Is this how am I supposed to open it? Like there is no elegant way to go from this to this. I know there are reasons for this. The AirPods themselves are now a lot bigger. So if you compare these side by side, the size is a lot bigger. Not only did they have to make this piece larger, they also had to fit the ear tips in it, which means there's simply no room for these two AirPods to be fit side by side on top anymore. But this, I don't know, this like a rectangle case opening from the long side, it really bugs me. So opening these with one hand is really troubling, and taking these out, this is my next problem with the case actually. So with the old ones, because they had a larger stem, I mean it would be okay to carry them like this. I mean, like you might want to like carry it like this in the palm of your hand, but carrying them like this, and even if you were to carry them like this, because the longer edges are on this side, you would naturally move to this direction. So, and when you open the case, it goes in like that. So it was pretty straightforward to know where these go. And if you look at the gap between the AirPods and the case all around, it has really tight margins. It has really tight margins. So if I look at this and I look at that, square peg, square hole, it works. But now let's look here. Well, first they move the stems to the sides, which means, and the stems are shorter now, so to be fair, you can't really carry these like this anymore. They're a lot heavier on the top and the stems are shorter, so this is no longer a natural way of carrying them. I mostly just carry them like this. But now, I don't have a quick way of knowing which one is left and right. And if I hold one, nope, that goes there. Yeah, and look at the gaps around. Look at this gap here. Look at this gap here. You can fit an airplane through here. Like, are you serious? Like, why is there so much gap? Like, what's going on? I don't get it. How did we go from this beautiful small margin, like it almost looks like it's like if you dip this in clay and take it out, that's what you'd get. How did we go from this beautiful form to this ungodly mess that it's just this blob. Like it's as if someone just like, and then that's what you got. Like if a baby just went and they did this and they poked 2 holes on the sides, that's what you got. And they're like, oh wait, we can fit these in here, but can you? Is it this side or is it the other one? Who knows? Just try 50-50. Okay, I'm done. With that point, there's a few more things. So next, let's talk about why the design of these 2 AirPods are as different as they are. In the first generation, the batteries were inside of the stem, and the length of the stem was determined by how big of a battery they needed. And everything else, all of the magic was inside here. And it was great. And you had a few main interactions with this one. There were 2 sensors here and here that would know when you put these in your ears. So when you put them in, they would start playing. When you take them out, they would pause. Perfect. And they had double tap. They could either invoke Siri or play and pause, next track, or volume up and down. And another thing you could do in the later generations, not this one, was to use the trigger word for Siri and invoke Siri that way. And they thought maybe that would be a good way to use to control your volume through Siri. Why not? But in the new one, they decided to move the battery from the stem to a circular battery, to a cylindrical battery, I should say, that is quite large and thick actually. If you look at iFixit's teardown of the new AirPods Pro, you'll see what I mean. There's a really large battery inside, which I hope it means that I will get a longer lasting battery out of this. These things started to last me about 1 hour towards the end, which is not ideal. I hope these last longer. So with the battery moved out of this section and moved up here, they no longer needed a stem. So if they cut this, that's your new AirPods. But how would you control it? So there's a sensor here, and there's one down here for detecting when it is in your ears or not. But they could no longer use the double tap feature. And the reason is, if you ever had in-ear headphones, if you touch this, it feels like someone's banging on your eardrums. So if you double tap on this, it is not good. Like it is really loud. Like the air pressure, when they form a tight seal, the air pressure that you're doing this, all of it would be transferred to your eardrums, and it is not a pleasant experience. So now they introduced back the stem and they added this touch area. I am fairly certain they are using a touch sensor and it's not actually a pressure sensor they're using here. So if you look at my finger when I'm pressing it, so with a light touch, a small area of my finger is touching it, and if I press harder, my finger deforms and would provide a larger contact area as if I was just gently tapping it. And I think that's what they're measuring when they detect a hard press. I might be wrong. If you know the answer to this, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know the right answer for this one. Now that they only needed this for interactions, they could make it as small as they want, and they figured that this is the right size for you to comfortably hold it and put it in and out of your ears. This no longer fits this way. This being sideways and a lot shorter, I'm sure it helps a lot fitting it in the case. And I want to point out now another thing that you might not have noticed. If you look at the stem, it is longer if you look at it this way than if you look at it this way. So it is not a perfect circle. So if you look closely, it is actually an oval, or I may say like a rectangular shape that is highly rounded on the corners, or a pill shape. And the reason is, if I hold it like this from the, this is a longer side, if I hold it like this and I just apply some pressure to, secure my grip, it naturally like folds, goes to the larger side. This would be an exaggeration, but this is what would happen if I just apply some pressure. Like this is, I feel secure holding it like this, but not as secure like this. And the reason is that this angle is a perfect angle for holding the AirPods and putting them in your ears. This is very small, but I love this attention to detail. And they kept the same principle, of course, for the new AirPods, except now there is this gentle recess here that lets you know where you can press it, and it actually lines up with the pill shape, so that as you hold it, you know where to press it. Every time you hold it up, you are reminded that you can press this or where to hold it to press it, and it's a perfect angle to put in your ear. and it's great. I love this attention to details. Those were my thoughts about the new AirPods versus the old ones. Oh, one more thing. So because the ear tips are quite soft and grippy, as they should be because you're putting them in your ears and you don't want them to fall out, sometimes they get stuck on the lid. But I found that if you just try to close it, it pushes them back in. That's very neat too. Okay, this is the end of my rant for the AirPods. I hope I didn't bother you too much with them. If you like something about the new AirPods, well, I should say if you don't like something about the new AirPods, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. And if you want to see me review anything else as critically as this one, let me know in the comments. I'd be glad to do these deep dives. Okay, have a good one.